wonderful presentation. And to all of you in the immediate family and the extended family, it is an awesome time to try to put into several words or into the time span of several minutes the awesome life of a man like Jake Reger and condense it. I know all about condensed books. I know about short stories. I know about the idea of all that kind of time of cramming things together. But I have a bio here that will give you a little more of a clarity, a little more of a clear picture of who Jake Reger was. For other than you immediate family, the rest of us have not known the greater life of Jake Reger. And it is very exciting. So I need you to adjust yourself, get in a good position and posture, and you have a great story to listen to. It says the Jake Reger bio. Once upon a time, George Roy Reger and Ellen Beulah Murky got married. After having a couple of boys, Al and George, in Pennsylvania, they moved around just a bit. After layovers in Colorado and Missouri, they stopped in Bush, Arkansas, because someone had to. There on October 16, 1938, the skies parted, the birds sang, and according to him, they found Jacob Peter Reger under a rock. Over the next several years, the Regers moved all around the country. I'm wondering where he's not been. And they had many more babies. After Jake, they went back to Pennsylvania to have Paul, then back to Arkansas for Mary, and then to Colorado for Russ and Marty and David. It was in Delta, Colorado that Jake considered his childhood home. He worked hard and he played hard, hanging out in the old treehouse, running in the ditches, playing marbles in the old dirt yard. He learned to play basketball on a homemade backboard, a sport that he loved to play throughout his life. Early on, it became clear that Jake was a whiz at math. Anyone here not know that? At a high school reunion earlier this year, Jake's classmates even told Janet how smart her dad was. One even told her he wouldn't have passed math class if it had not been for the help of his friend Jake. Although there was never a lot of money around, Jake didn't let this stop his imagination from running free. At one point, he and his classmates were given the traditional "what you did last summer" assignment at school. Not wanting to be shown up by his friends, Jake wrote this great paper. He detailed an elaborate and fun vacation in Yellowstone, full of adventure and intrigue. When he finally did get to go to Yellowstone, during the 2008 Reger reunion, he and his siblings shared laughs at this vacation that never was. Jake's teen years weren't the easiest, but he was blessed to find a great friend and supporter in Dr. Jim Hamilton, the minister of the Nazarene church there in Delta. Dr. Hamilton helped Jake finish high school through correspondence courses and helped him complete all the requirements to enter Pasadena College a month before his 16th birthday. Unreal. And so, as a 15-year-old boy, Jake packed up and moved to California to start a new chapter in his life. He was now a college student, but he was still a teenager with all that entails. By the time he was a sophomore, Jake decided that maybe school wasn't for him, so he made this conscious effort to flunk out. Anybody ever done that? He was really very smart, so it had to be a very conscious effort to flunk. Mary tells a story she heard from her German professor at Pasadena, Dr. Ernst. It seems that he was quite frustrated with Jake, his student, commenting that statistically the only way to get every single answer wrong on a true-false test is if you really know all the correct answers. I agree. Since that very first attempt at college didn't work out, Jake began this love-hate relationship with the U.S. Army in 1957. After basic training in California, he ended up stationed at Fort, you have to help me. Thank you. In the desert. It's better than trying. In the desert of southeast Arizona. In his words, Fort Hoochie Coochie. That's what he calls it. That's what I should have said to begin with. That was the spot across from the San Pedro River, the land that God forgot. Well, he was still a very smart guy, so he became the company clerk, which had some significant benefits. For example, he ended up with a pretty nice marksmanship rating, despite the fact that at that time, he never actually even tested on the range. Realizing that they were never going to be great friends, Jake stopped fighting in the Army, and in 1959, when he decided to then give college another try. That summer, he went back to Pasadena and re-enrolled. And at that point, his life changed forever. For a certain beautiful lady named Charlene Wiley, who was also attending Pasadena College at that time, was there. They met. They dated about a year. He took her out on the lake in a paddle boat. And he then told her that he wouldn't paddle them back to dry land unless she agreed to marry him. Would you have said yes? It seems that she did agree. They were married on the 2nd day of July in 1960, beginning a wonderful time of 52 years of marriage. In 1962, Jake received his bachelor's degree in physics. And in the fall of that year, the couple moved to Charlene's hometown of Albuquerque. And then following in April of 63, they became parents when their son Jeff was born. Jake's physics degree now and his love for technology soon came in very handy. He moved the family to Las Cruces when he got a job at White Sands Missile Range. He really was now a rocket scientist. His favorite saying while he was working there was, and we remember, "We launched a missile into the air. It fell to earth, we know not where." He loved to tell the story about a time when the guidance system went haywire, causing him to send a missile all the way to Green River, Utah. He didn't get in too much trouble, though, because the missile didn't have a live warhead. Thank the Lord. While in Las Cruces, Charlene began thinking about having the second child. Jake asked her to get a college degree first, so she could then support herself if something ever happened to him. So she did. She got a degree in home ec from New Mexico State. True to his word, once she finished that degree, their daughter Janet was born in 1968. Now, just 2 years later, Jake received his master's degree in computer science from there at NMSU. It was still a fairly new field back then. The first actual computer science degree in the United States was only formed 8 years prior to that. Following various jobs, the Regers then moved to Boulder in 72, to Littleton in 74, to Montrose in 76. This was a very important town in the life of all the Regers. It was there that Jeff graduated from high school. It was there that they met Bob and Carol Broadbooks, who were the pastors at the Nazarene church there in Montrose. Pastor Bob was instrumental in refocusing Jake's walk on Jesus Christ and his commitment to life as a follower of Jesus. And it was there that Jake got bit by that bug to try his hand at becoming a college professor. Well, he responded to that bug, and the Regers were soon moving to Quincy, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston's historic South Shore district, where Jake got a job teaching computer science at Eastern Nazarene College. He was definitely not a fan of the bureaucracy that comes with college, but he loved his students. He quickly became a student favorite. That wasn't just because of his teaching. It was also because every Sunday, and you'll understand this, he and Charlene would have a handful of students over for pot roast. Now, what college student doesn't love a home-cooked meal? It was there that Janet graduated from high school, and it was there that they met Elma Malcolm, who eventually became their daughter-in-law once Jeff married her in 1986. Well, eventually the bureaucrats and the weather got to them, and Jake wanted to move back into the West. At first he didn't care where, just as long as it was west of the Mississippi River. So in 1985 they moved to Cincinnati for just a bit. Then they jumped at the chance in January of 1986 to move to Colorado Springs. Well, they lived for a bit on Mary Lane, and then in November of that year they settled into the house that would become their home for more than 20 years, 7020 on Nettlewood Place. They attended Springs First Church for many years, made many wonderful friends, including some pastor named Denny Hage. Soon after starting at First Church, Jake and Charlene became very involved in the nursery program. That puts Ann and I back to 25 years ago, meeting the Reger family. Over the years, they ministered to more children than they could even count. And remember, he was a rocket scientist. As you'll hear in a little bit, they had a huge impact, not just on the kids, but on the parents as well. Jake was involved in many aspects of the life of the church. One of his passions was to help people to become free from their worries about money. He and Charlene led numerous people through the Crown Financial Ministries program. That ministry was very important to him, but most remember him with his first love, holding kids, playing with kids, and loving kids. It wasn't just at the church where they took care of people. There at their house on Nettlewood, it became a place of refuge and help for many folk here in town. Oh, several times over the years, they took in people that even needed a place to stay overnight. They gave generously to many people. On more than one occasion, Jake would come home from work and find that Charlene had given away their couch to someone who needed furniture. Now, that is a surprise to the husband. Jake's nephew, Cortland, reminded us about a time when he was even a poor college student. Some new technology became available, the insulin pump, and it would have made Court's life much easier. Of course, it was $1,000 at that time, and Court was living on student loans. But it was a need, so Jake and most of the other Reger siblings got together, raised the money for Court to get that insulin pump, because helping people is just what Jake did wherever he went. Eventually, the house became filled with the sound of children's laughter as Jake and Charlene started watching their grandchildren on a regular basis. Every day after school, Stephanie and Ryan and Chris would come and spend time with Grammy and Poppy. And Nettlewood is where they were living when they met Mikey Cunningham, the man their daughter Janet married. In the fall of 2002, Jake began having a cascade of TIAs, these little small brain events that were the first of what would end up becoming many. By all outward appearance, these first TIAs didn't have that greatest effect, but Jake could tell the difference. Those differences began to weigh on him. And so the next October, when he just turned 65, Jake retired, started yet another chapter in his life. So in the fall of 2004, Jake's granddaughter Stephanie asked Poppy to start going to church here at Trinity, Nazarene, so that he could go to church with his grandchildren. Not ones to say no to children, especially to his kids. Jake and Charlene started attending this church, and they quickly got involved here with the nursery program. Since he'd retired, his life revolved more and more around kids. Kids at church, his grandkids, kids in the neighborhood, and any kids he ran across. They all loved Poppy. In October 2007, Jake had another serious series of TIAs, and these were quite serious. While he was in the hospital, we remember visiting him there, Jake's sisters, Mary and Marty, and his brother-in-law, Dwayne, packed up everything at the house on Nettlewood, put it into storage, and Jeff arranged to have the house sold. When Jake then got out of the hospital, he and Charlene moved in with her brother-in-law, Ray Wiley, and his wife, Patty. The next month, they moved into the Sunridge Independent Senior Living community. It was a nice place, but not really what they were yet looking for. So 6 months later, they moved into a nice 800 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment at the Preserve. Well, after a couple of years, Charlene admitted to her daughter, Janet, that she needed some help. So in September of 2010, Janet and her husband, Mikey, they moved to Colorado Springs and into this apartment. Now, suddenly, 4 adults and 4 doggies, that little 800 square foot apartment didn't seem so nice. So they started looking. And in January of 2011, they all moved into the house on Rushford. In the time leading up to that purchase, Jake was so excited about the prospect. He took to saying, "All roads lead to Rushford." And he and Charlene drove by that house many a time, even before the sale was final. Well, since their grandkids had gotten older, and since Janet and Mikey had expressed excitement about their church, and because it was closer to their home, Jake and Charlene started going with Janet and Mikey to Springs Community Church, where they then met another group of loving people. So having gotten to attend church with Jeff and Elma and the grandkids for a number of years, they now got to appreciate going with Janet and Mikey for a while. As traveling began to become more and more difficult, their kids helped them take some very important trips. In 2009, Jeff and Elma took them to Delta, Colorado for the Reger reunion. In 2010, Janet and Mikey took them to Whidbey Island in Washington for another Reger reunion. In 2011, Janet and Mikey took them back to Delta this time for Jake's high school reunion. In April of this year, Janet and Mikey took them to Albuquerque to help Charlene's dear Uncle Vern celebrate his 99th birthday. And in a great example of care and love, the 2011 and 2012 Reger reunions have been now in Colorado Springs, Denver areas, respectfully, so that Jake and Charlene can participate. Well, medically, the last year has been very, very tough. In December a year ago, he had a CVA, which is a larger stroke type event. It really affected, I remember when this happened, it really affected his left side. Over the next 11 months, he had 2 more CVAs, several more TIAs. He then had a couple of falls, broken hip, dysphagia, the insertion of a feeding tube, etc. Largely thanks to the love and effort of his kids, Jake got to spend his last days at his home with his wife, daughter, son-in-law, and lots of puppies. This certainly helped his peace of mind. Until the very end, he always made sure that his wife was okay. Jake was very blessed to be able to see a lot of his family this last year. You all have been such a faithful family. And this Thanksgiving, just weeks ago, his kids and grandkids were all at the house sharing in the holiday. And just the day before he passed, his sister Marty and his brother-in-law Dwayne came by to see him. Around 10:15 on November 25, Jake breathed his last on this world and went to be with his Father in heaven in the next. He touched everyone he met, and he left a powerful legacy of love that's literally spread around the world. We'll miss you, Jake, but we'll be joining you soon enough. And what a party it's going to be. And everybody said, amen.